Now here's a true story of the unexplained. This is something my dad told me. He was born and raised in Cumberland Gap. Born in the late 20s, raised up in the Depression of the 30s. And this happened in the early 30s in Cumberland Gap. There's been talk about seeing a big old black cat roaming and terrorizing the livestock. And this was in the early 30s. Some call it a Wampus cat, a wildcat, a cougar, a panther, and people say they ain't no such a thing, but people swears they are. Well, we'll get started here. If you don't know nothing about Cumberland Gap, I'm going to show you, bring you up to date a little bit. This is from the pinnacle in the national park, the overview. Now up here, you can see all the Tennessee Valley in this area. See Harrogate, right below our feet is Cumberland Gap. And that off just a little bit to the distance right here is what Tipperell looked like, just below the Gap back in the 30s. It's just a little community with a railroad from Cumberland Gap goes to the Knoxville. And we're going across Cumberland Mountain here from the Gap, and you go to the city of Minnesboro. This is what it looks like today. Here's what Minnesboro looked like back in the 30s. Back in that time period. Sits in a big basin here. They say it was formed by a crater, but that's just another theory. And you come back to the mountains that divide them, Cumberland Gap on the left, Minnesboro on the right. There's a big holler up through here Yellow Creek comes out of. That's Fern Lake. It supplies water to Minnesboro. And that big long-range mountain range you're looking down is Cumberland Mountain. And there it is, the same picture in the wintertime. Looking down Cumberland Mountain up towards Tackett Creek, Fern Lake. There's a lot of wilderness back in there. It is so vast and wild. Now this is how Cumberland Mountain 25E back in the 30s and 40s looked going across the mountain. Back in the day. Now here's Cumberland Gap, looking back towards Cumberland Mountain in the foreground. A lot of history passed through this gap for the last 250 years. A lot of history. A beautiful place too. Now my dad was born probably, I don't know, half a mile to a mile from Cudjoe's Cave on the Virginia side of this area in Lewis Holler. And it's no longer there. It's all national park now, just a foundation. And here's what Cumberland Gap looked like back around the time. Road come across the mountain and everything went down into the gap. And it split off going to Virginia just before you went down into the gap. Now this in the foreground is the community of Tipperell. It's just a little community just southwest of the Gap, just a half a mile from the Gap. And it comes out in Arthur there in Powell Valley. And the railroad line goes through there, the Knoxville line. And this is looking from Tipperell back towards Cumberland Gap. You can see the railroad there on your right. Beautiful country, but it's just old. Not many people even knows about this place anymore. Well, after my dad was born a few years, they moved into Tipperell, and there's kind of a house they had. Just nothing special, didn't have a big farm. And my dad's dad, grandfather, he was a logger. He would stay gone weeks at a time logging. And my dad was about 12 kids. He was probably the eldest of the boys. And he would just work these farms, try to make some money for the family. And he would go to the store every once in a while in the Gap there. And he would listen to people talking about stories they see, like seeing a cat, big old black cat around the edge of these farms and these mountains roaming around the edge of these woods watching this livestock. And on moonlit nights, when the moon was really up, it was really active for some reason, they'd even hear it off in the distance. And some farmers had livestock being killed. They'd even see it and shoot at it, but they never could hit it or nothing. They'd run it off. Well, there's a bunch of coon hunters around here, and they really prized on their dogs. They was really good coon hunters. And they thought, well, they'll get together and try to hunt this thing. They had some really good dogs. They'd done a lot of coon hunting. And you could see here the pelts they got. And every once in a while, they'd run into a bear. Some of these dogs that they had would hold a bear at bay until the master got up there to shoot it. So they had some pretty good dogs. So they gathered up all the dogs they could there, and they're going to see if they can go fix this problem, find this beast, and get rid of it. Well, it wasn't too long. They got on the scent of it, running across them mountain ridges, and held it at bay, had it treed, waiting on the master to come up. But before they come up, this old cat, whatever it was, he didn't like being up there in that tree, them dogs keeping it at bay, barking at it. So it decided to come out of it. And when it come down, he started fighting with them dogs. The rumor says that he told me that he killed a couple of them, maimed a couple of them, and it run on off. And they gathered their dogs up and got on out of there. Well, time went on. He just kept working these farms. Nobody liked to get out after dark, though, because they would hear this thing or see it on top of one of these rocks on these ridges, and people didn't like it at all. Well, he told me the rumor went that they got a special kind of hunters in here that hunts mountain lions and dogs, and they hunted this thing down and killed it. And some say they didn't. Some say they just drove it on back in the mountains. And as time went on, it kind of died down. It just about forgotten about. Now they say if they didn't kill it, they drove it on back in these Cumberland mountain ridges, back in these mountains, back in these hollers and valleys, way back in there in the deep country. Some wild country back in there, I'm telling you, because I've hunted it. Now there's even pictures of people taking pictures of these cougars, panthers, whatever you call it, in Tennessee. Right there's a picture of it. Now what these things are, no, they're not panthers from South America, but there's some kind of cat that's black. Don't know. People swear there's no such a thing. They'll swear you're crazy, Donnie. I've had my friends tell me that. And then there's people that have seen it, actually physically seen it. So you know what I'm talking about. But there's the story. Hope you enjoyed this. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.